Public comments. Did we receive any public comments, sir?
No, sir.
All right. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting that we had on July 22nd, 2020?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. I second.
The second. Okay. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Just a minute,
For
excuse
the
me.
special meeting, for the
There's
special
two,
meeting.
there's two sets of meetings.
Two meetings. The one on January 15th, 2020, and the one on June 17th, 2020.
I make a motion to approve both minutes from both meetings.
Mr. Chair, I need to abstain from the one of January because I wasn't here in January.
All right,
So I can only, I will vote yeah on the second one on June 16th, but I have to abstain on January 15th.
all right, sir.
I'm in the same boat.
All right.
Likewise, Mr. Chairman.
Most people on the same boat.
That's it.
But we just go ahead and cover the,
Well, they were provided, but they were provided in writing, so as long as we're reviewing them, is that?
Yes, that's fine.
okay, all right. Could I get- who's second the motion?
Second.
All right, second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming. Good to have you all here. We can go over to page 16. I know this is a pretty busy page right here, but we'll go through a few things. The very top part of the report deals with the ADC complex and our buildings on the left, the central building, the main, the iron building, and the modular building. And you'll see next to that is the operational capacity of 667. The operational capacity is the state rate of capacity that buildings are built for, does not consider double bunking. The management capacity is 1,020 for the ADC. This number we feel we can house safely with double bunking. However, the number of administrative segregation inmates, those who are security risk, severe mentally ill, and medical issues tend to lower that number because they certainly can't be housed with other people. The next section is our average daily population that you see there going back to FY 2010 all the way to 2020, the current FY number. And you look at the number of FY 10 at 944 and go down. Our highest numbers were in the next few years of 1,044. 1123 was our all-time high, and 1131 was the all-time high. And we'll talk about in a few minutes about the evidence-based decision-making project that was 2014 that started. So you see our very high numbers and how they've gone down. Certainly some of the numbers are affected by COVID, especially this year. The next group of numbers is the ADP with each month, and breaks down all of our facilities that we have there along the line with 792 for the FY year. Department of Corrections out of compliance number is 78 inmates. These are state inmates that are sentenced to 1 year or more on felony cases. The state has not been taking inmates since March. So that number has gone up somewhat. Hopefully we'll hear something from the DOC director on when they're going to start taking inmates. Transfers to the state system for May and June, you see there, of course, are 0. Commits are low for that time period. Result of COVID, I'm sure. And releases, you see there also. We've had the only real releases we had was through the court system that released quite a few number of inmates, which allowed us to have our quarantine pod during COVID. ADC staff do conduct police processing. Those are released by the magistrate. You see the numbers there, 70 in May and 63 the next month. We also do police processing for those that are committed to the adult detention center, which in different times can be up to 800 a month. That way the police officer can come in, go to the magistrate, get a commitment, get a warrant and a commitment card. You don't have to hang around for the police processing so they can get back into the community. Over on page 17, that is the average daily population for the month of May for the complex of 537, which of course is very low related to COVID. Page 18 for June, same deal, 521. That's a relatively low number for this complex when we've been up in the 800s and 900s recently. On page 19, we talk about farm outs. We have no farm outs in the month of June. In fact, we haven't had farm outs since December. Farm outs are used for crowding conditions in other jails. We use 2 jails, Middle Peninsula Regional in Saluda, Virginia, and RSW Regional in Luray. But we are not dealing with farm outs now, of course. And you can see the cost year to date for the farm outs. 26,277. Page 20 is our history all the way back to FY 1983 of 178 when we started. And you can see as it goes up in 2014, you see those big numbers there again, and then starts going down somewhat, 2018 and 19 and 773 system-wide. Newman's Creek Regional Jail, we used to house inmates there, but that was closed down several years ago. It was used for to take advantage of if you were crowded. We had 75 beds there, and there was 5 other jurisdictions that used Newman's Creek, but they closed that down several years ago. The other jails were not crowded. We were still crowded at the time, but they weren't. So that ended that contract with them. All right, the next page is my objectives for 2020. We're ending them up. Coming up today, the 287G program, of course, as everyone knows, ended on July 1st, 2020. I do have a 287G update and at the end of the meeting, post 287G. Prison Rape Elimination Act protects inmates from sexual assault and harassment. It is a federal act and has mandatory compliance inspections. We had ours in April 27th, 28th, 29th. The Adult Detention Center received the final report of full compliance. Our next inspection will be in 3 years from April. Career development, we talk about master jail officers first. Those are the officers who have to be here for 3 years, and they train new staff. They have a very important job, and it's the first level of the career development here at the Adult Detention Center. 17 supervisors attended supervisor in service in May. Master jail officers completed their training in June, and 7 supervisors attended new supervisory training June 8th to the 10th. That's put on by the county. One thing important, I need to let everyone know that the Adult Detention Center conducts all mandated state training, including Jail Basic Academy and in-service training and any other training we have to have. We're very proud of that. We're the only jail in Virginia that does perform our own training. We're partners with the Prince William Criminal Justice Academy, and it's great to have your staff doing the training because they have the philosophy and knows what needs to be done here. Phase 2, our new construction. I know you all seen the building by driving by. One good thing, we're going to be moving the Iron Building, moving inmates from the Iron Building, the work release section. Inmates and staff will be relocated to phase 2 on August 3rd. This will be the first section to occupy the new building. Tentative completion date is September 27th. So we're excited to close down the Iron Building. Been there since 1989. And that's going to be a good experience to have work release on site here. Number 5, participation with the evidence-based decision-making policy team. This policy team was formed back around 2014, and it includes all the criminal justice agencies in the county and Manassas City. Just to name a few: pretrial services, ADC staff, Sheriff's Department, PDs, probation, judges, Bar Association, social service, anyone who comes in contact with an inmate along the way. And we did some mapping as to where the inmates are in the system, and it was quite long, and we could find out the gaps. So we still have a lot of work to do, but some good successes here at the ADC. We do have a reentry dorm. Inmates are in that dorm for 90 days before release. Services come in to prepare them for release. They have classes in there on how to change their criminal thinking, but also DMV will come in and help them with their IDs and so forth. Housing, CS, all of them come in and connect them to those services that they need in the community. We've seen our recidivism rate drop pretty good since we opened that up. Current initiatives for the ADC include the implementation of medicated assisted therapy for high-risk opioid users, and a grant through community services to issue Narcan to high-risk opioid users upon release. ADC EBDM programs include inmate reentry dorm. We talked about the veterans docket, opioid peer navigators. We have a full-time Medicaid staff member on board also. So, and there's more to that, and we'll continue to meet as we go along. And Mr. Chairman, the next page is my proposed objectives for 22, July 22nd, 2020. I removed the 287G, and I put in there, implement additional strategies to increase recruitment and hiring of the adult detention center staff, vacant positions. Under normal times, we have the highest turnover rate of any public safety agency in the county. Not everyone is for working in jails. We know that. We've had some people come and stay one day and say, it's not for me, stay a week. But the people who do stay do an outstanding job. Right now, we have 451 total authorized positions, 46 sworn vacancies, and 10 civilians. So we're going to be working on this pretty hard. Our HR does a great job, but we want to enhance it somewhat. In fact, every restaurant I go to, I always ask the waiter if he's looking for a job. My wife won't go with me anymore, so anyway. Down in where we left the Prison Rape Elimination Act, we need to still follow that. Career development training. When we talk about, of course, phase 2 is on there, but we need to add, we added there the main jail repair project, which was built in 1982, our original jail. That project will begin hopefully later on this year. That's a big project. That building needs a lot of work. It's cell blocks and so forth. And of course, we'll continue to participate with the evidence-based decision-making policy team also. That's it, sir.
Thanks, Superintendent.
All
Any
right.
questions for the superintendent so far? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, for the record, Deputy, could you? Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, Ms. Beacon.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to go over the 64 vacancies. You say 64 vacancies of sworn officers that you are in need with?
Well, let me get the number. 46 sworn and 10 civilian.
May I ask for how long those vacancies have been, available?
Well, we've been hiring for the new building, and these are positions for that new building.
Oh, for the new one.
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I have a question about that.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Is there a way to disaggregate data to know in terms of diversity, how many jails officers you have of different ethnicities or race?
Okay. Yes.
In order to have a strategy to use those 45 vacancies and 10 civilians to make it better, in terms of diversity within the jail?
We have one of the most diverse agencies in the county. In fact, 51% of our staff are non-white here at the Adult Detention Center. So we have a huge, diverse group of employees here. In fact, I've been asked by other agencies, well, how do you do that? I mean, when they come to their graduations and so forth. And my answer is, we hire them if they qualify. And once they qualify, I mean, we don't say you got to have a 4-year degree or a master's degree. We go ahead and hire them as long as they qualify for the job and meet the basic standards. But we are extremely diverse and we're very proud of it. That's for sure.
But when you say you're diverse and you're talking about non-white, that's what you're referring to?
Yes.
But even non-whites, they could be Asians, Hispanics,
True.
women, so there may be a lot of categories.
Yeah, there is, yes.
So if you don't disaggregate the data, you don't know if you are going to make a market, you're going to market for women or marketing for ethnicities or so you can actually build a pool, put it that way, a pool from which you can actually select and increase diversity,
I understand.
not only in the non-white area, because you may have non-white may be black for you, and that's fine, but there's a lot of other categories that are generally part of diversity that should be represented in a jail.
Sure. We can certainly look at that, sure.
That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question also.
Yes, sir.
Superintendent, on the great report, by the way, thank you, and very informative. On the year-end stats for the 2020 objectives, on the PREA compliance, you said the final report said full compliance.
Yes, sir.
Were there any comments that they made, possible areas of improvement or anything like that at all? Or was it just an objective?
It was a extensive 3-day report, and there was so many things that we had to do. So he looked at a few things that we had to correct and so forth, but overall it went outstanding.
Appreciate that. Anything notable that he pointed out as areas of?
Well, several blind spots in the main building in the cell blocks, but we're correcting some of those.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comment operationally on law enforcement. I want to thank you and your staff for the police processing portion that allows our staff to get in and back out into our communities quicker. I can remember the days where you could be here for well over an hour waiting to process. So I know we both appreciate that. So our staff gets back out on the street. Compliment on the career development goal. Great job. You got to have it. That's going to help you with your recruitment. So those are good goals. Question about our numbers, Colonel, moving forward, just so it can help me prepare financially. Our numbers are lower. Do we anticipate, I know part of that is COVID, and we've changed some of our policies on the input and the release side. Do you anticipate those policies staying in place that are going to maybe keep our numbers lower? Has there been any comments from the judges or the magistrate on that?
Well, I think with COVID, most of the people who were released were pretrial.
Okay.
The state did release 9 inmates from here, from the state side, but most of them were pretrial, and we expect them to go back to court sometime this summer. And some of them will be coming back, of course, but I can't predict that that number, Chief. Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing too, this year our staff is serving warrants on inmates who are here, so the police don't have to do that either. So we're doing that through our intake section.
Thank you.
Can I make a statement also?
Sure, Tracy.
I wanted to echo what the chief was just talking about from the defense attorney's perspective. So you all know I've just become the chief public defender in Prince William County. Today I was on a listserv with other chiefs all over the state of Virginia asking what the status of all of our jails are, whether there's contact with attorneys, whether there's contact with family members, and whether there is whether people have restarted their drug treatment program. And I was the only attorney on this listserv that came back and said, well, yeah, we're having contact visits, and yeah, they not stopped family visitation at all in the jail. It's been changed, but it's still going on. And yeah, they've still got the drug treatment and a lot of the programs that are in-house. Other people rely on volunteers and people coming in. Well, we have all that in-house. So as a defense attorney, I'm in this weird, situation where I just love our jail. And all over the state, we're the envy of other defense bars. Prince William County ADC takes really seriously the goal of non-recidivism and helping people to be more successful when they come out of here. And I have my differences occasionally with policies of the jail, but by and large, we're just far and away so much more concerned about recidivism and the quality of life of people when they come out. So thank you.
Thank you. We have an outstanding staff here. They're dedicated. I mean, they smile a lot while they're here. They get the job done. And through COVID, I mean, jails were the hot spot when COVID first came out, and our numbers spiked at one time, but they did not hesitate. They did not, fake illness. They were here every day and doing the tough job. They had their hands on it, Tracy. So I appreciate your comments.
Mr. Chair. Yes, sir. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment as well about working with the ADC and some things. Since COVID got mentioned, and I don't see it on the agenda to be reported out on, but I just wanted to say the ADC has done a phenomenal job during this crisis, and I know that they weren't free of having the virus here, but that was a foregone conclusion that was going to be that way. But they did a remarkable job of handling it, and they work very well with partner agencies. And my agency does pretrial and community corrections, and they were very good at working with us, keeping my staff safe and getting us access to the inmates, which was a great concern to me when the crisis started, because I was very concerned that we would not get to interview people and have them be before the judge so that they could be released if they were appropriately released. And that was not a problem. We did not miss a beat during the whole crisis. And court arraignments, so there are a lot of court processes did not operate. Arraignments did, and it was because of the cooperation of the ADC. So I just wanted to say that, and also their partnership with the evidence-based decision-making initiative that Major Lambert and I are co-facilitators or co-coordinators of that team with your leadership, and we have done some phenomenal work to help reduce the ADC population and make sure that the right people are in the criminal justice system. So I just wanted to make that comment, because it's been good work, and we were making progress even before the numbers went down to making sure that we were making sure the right people were people.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, that brings me to what the superintendent was talking about during his objectives. Historically, the objectives are approved by the board, and of course, based on the comments that we heard tonight, it's time for the superintendent to have an evaluation. I did not bring it tonight, but thank you. You'll hear the comments, and at our next meeting, I will bring the superintendent's evaluation. And you heard the comments tonight, so next in September, when we do the evaluation, you can consider some of the comments that you heard tonight. Some of them will be in his evaluation of how he runs the adult detention center. Also, the proposed objectives that we had last year. And what I need from the board tonight is to approve the proposed objectives for 2021 that the superintendent has just presented to us. And when we do that, we hold him accountable for those objectives and how he runs the adult detention center. So could I get a motion to approve the objectives?
Mr. Chairman, may I have a question before we move forward?
All right.
I just see the objectives, but I don't see when these objectives should be adopted by or accomplished. So I don't know. So are we assuming that this is gonna be accomplished by the end of this fiscal year? For how long are we voting this for?
Well, this objectives start actually in July until the end of June next year. And,
Oh.
right.
So we are voting on these objectives to be accomplished by June 30th, 2021.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Any questions? Council person? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Dennis, could you call the roll, please?
Austin,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Clymer. Aye. Guzman.
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
King,
Aye.
Costelecki. Lennox. Smith.
Aye.
Torres.
Aye.
Unanimous, sir.
Thank you, Jeremy, thank you. Next on the agenda is the jail population stat report. Superintendent, you want to present that to us?
I think Major Lambert, you're gonna take care of that for us.
So in front of you, you should have a packet that looks similar to this. Basically, what we do is we provide population reports to kind of track what's going on in the adult detention center. It breaks it down into buildings. So we have several buildings on the complex. So main building, Manassas complex would be the overall. And then you have your main, your central, your iron. The only thing that I'd like to point out is that we can actually look at any one of these graphs and see when COVID and the executive order from Governor Northam first came out, right? That's when we started seeing the movement from the courts and reducing the population. So if you look at graph number 4, I felt was one of the ones that really highlighted the extensive push to reduce our population to combat COVID-19. Our iron building houses our work release population, which is our low risk level offenders that go out and work in the community. And if you look at the March number, we were at 66, that has a capacity of 75. So 66 is a really good number for people that qualify for the program. And by June, we were at 10. 10 inmates were on our work release program because most of the inmates that were released from custody from this particular population were low risk offenders, right? Being able to return them to the community with harm reduction goals in a safe manner made sense. And this is very telling what the courts did. So the next one I want you to take a look at is graph number 6. Colonel Melita talked about that a little bit, but Virginia DOC, our Department of Corrections, where state inmates are transferred to if serving 3 years or more typically. We went to 0 the last 3 months because Department of Corrections too wanted to prevent COVID-19 from entering their correctional facility, so they stopped accepting inmates from local jails. So we were at 0 the last 3 months. We have not seen an extension letter, but we have not seen a relief letter either from the Virginia Department of Corrections. So we're waiting to see what the movement is going to be at that level. The commitments is the last thing that I'll talk about, which is the very next graph, graph number 7. If you look at the bottom of my graph, it has commits and ADP. Commits is the number of people that are committed to this jail, whether it's from the street, from a local officer making an arrest, or from the courts, if somebody is confined to serve a sentence or what have you. The ADP is the average daily population. So when you look at the commitments, if you look right around the October, November, it's running right in the 700s a month. Fast forward to March, when half of the month we were pre-Governor Northam's executive order, the remaining half of the month we started seeing a decline. But April is very telling as to what happened. 340 commitments in 1 month. We have not seen that in 20 years, maybe 25 years. So that's very telling. We started seeing a little bit of an uptick towards May and June, but not significant enough to be able to really analyze the data to determine why. And that really is it. We have some historical data in here from 1982 when the jail first opened. It really is just kind of a graph. You can see the sharp decline on your very next graph. The commitments from 1992 show a sharp decrease, which is very telling to what we are contending with. And the Colonel asked me to explain graph number 10. It's a little difficult to understand. So on the left side, your pie chart is the actual population for June, which was 521. And I break down housing of inmates in particular facilities. So the central, at that snapshot date of June, was 178 inmates housed in the central jail. The modular was housing 79. The right side of the pie chart is your management capacity. So we can safely manage with adequate staff and resources 1,020 inmates based on the bed space, double bunking, those types of things. So that percentage is the percentage of beds that are available. So two totally different data points, but I wanted to give you an idea of what our 100% maximum capacity that we can house here safely, including the management capacity on the right pie chart. And then the left pie chart is the actual capacity that we're housing in those facilities. And the sharp decline, Colonel Lucas talked about farm outs. We haven't had farm outs since December of last year, but you can see the bar graph on graph 11 getting closer together as we move through the time frame, whereas system ADP would be your overall count, which included anybody that was farmed out at other facilities, and our count in-house on complex. Graph number 12 just really does talk about since 1998, we saw a sharp decrease post-COVID for the last couple of years, which will show up in your next packet of data. So it will drop off to July of 2020. So the last chart, we haven't really talked about this a lot, and this takes a lot of time, so I'm going to do a quick version. We had a community-based corrections plan done that we have to have done in order to justify building an expansion. And when we started this back in 2013, 2014, we hired Mosley Architects to study our facility and the need for. And one of the things that was done in that community-based corrections plan is at the very end of this big packet of stuff that justified the need for the beds was, if you continue to do the things the usual way, if you continue to operate the same way, you're going to need this amount of beds. And if you look at the chart, we were right at what the projection was, 1165. We were over our management capacity. We were farming out. So the study went out to FY28, projecting these population points. As of today, we should be right around 1,450. If you look back through 2 years worth even of the data, you could see these really little tiny decreases in our population. And that's because of the work that the EBDM team was doing, right? Heavily using pretrial or using it right, working with George Mason University, getting people into treatment, all of those things. So this is very telling as to what's happening. And then COVID hit and we saw this sharp decrease. Somebody asked, what does the forecast look like? If we could forecast population, well, we wouldn't be working it, or we would be able to forecast population. It's very difficult to do in a jail, but it's very telling as to what's happening. So does anybody have any questions about any of the graphs? A lot of information. Sometimes it just takes some time to absorb what we've got going on. But just remember, it's broken down into buildings mostly based on the number of inmates that we have in each particular building. That's all I have.
Thank you, Major.
Thank you.
On the agenda is the budget update. Carol Gannett?
If you'll turn to page 33 in your package, we have the commissary budget status listed there. Our commissary budget is now in the $2.2 million range. We provided the end of year budget status, which is well below some of the projects we had planned on doing because of COVID. We were unable. For example, we're working on the television infrastructure. We couldn't have the person come in to do the walkthrough to advance that project. So we're hoping to see some movement on those projects in the near future. I will note that you don't see any expenditures for magazines, but they were provided to inmates. We just, the vendor said that we did not owe them anything, so we are just waiting for invoices. So that was provided. And I've also provided the FY21 budget that you approved at the last meeting last month. So does anyone have any questions on the commissary?
I have a question. What are the services that you're purchasing from Axe? I'm familiar with the agency.
So we have an agreement with them, and we provide them usually, that's the agreed amount, and they come in and they provide services with the inmates. I think maybe Major Osmond can put a little more detail on that, what they actually do with the inmates.
declare one of the programs that, I'm not sure what the annual fee is for.
Acts is for sexually abused people who receive treatment and counseling.
So it's essentially mental health services.
Sorry?
Essentially, it's mental health services.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Any questions for Carol?
I don't know if this is appropriately directed to Carol or not, but I think it's attached to this. So it's page 34 and it's describing second paragraph from the bottom. SCAP funds that are received, the amount of 382,796. Can you tell me what those, can you describe what that is and how does the jail end up getting those funds?
We've been getting those funds since at least fiscal year 2000. I believe I have records back at least that far. Those are funds made available by the federal government to help defray the costs of housing illegal aliens. What we do simply is when we ask people when they come in where they were born, anyone who was born, who reports to have been born outside the US, we provide that information in a data file to the federal government, and they determine through an interface with immigration and their system whether or not those people are payable. The program has changed over the years, and now it's that I believe they'll tell you the inmates need to be here more than 72 consecutive hours. They have to be certain types of charges. They have to be, a felony or 2 misdemeanors. It changes somewhat from year to year, but then based upon, they have a certain amount that's, that they have budgeted, depending upon the number of people that apply for the award and your proportion, you get an award. So that's basically that funding. So we've submitted for that for many, many years.
So it's something that we actually apply for.
Yes.
It's a grant, correct?
It is a grant, but it's more of an award. It's not there's no reporting on our part other than to provide the data, and then based on what we provided, they provide us the award back.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I have a question, purely out of curiosity. At the top
Sure.
of page 34,
Yes.
you said there are no single items in the $2,500 to $4,000 range to be reported in accordance with SOP 5107. What is SOP 5107?
Our standard operating procedure for that, we would report to the board if we purchase any items that are within are above that amount, in that cost range.
Okay, so is that meant to be like a management control for high
Yes,
expenditures?
so if
Okay.
we, if
Okay.
it's something that we have budgeted for and we know it's going to cost that much, we certainly wouldn't, we receive the invoice from the county schools, we wouldn't report that because that's part of the budget.
Okay, got
But
it.
if we had a miscellaneous expense that exceeded that amount, we would certainly report it to you
All
and
right,
let you know about it.
thank you.
The inmate account balance reconciled was 102, which is relatively low, reflects our lower inmate count. Our federal inmate billing is also down considerably, about 3,500 and 5,000 in June. We expect that to remain low with this, since we're no longer with doing 287G. So we do receive revenue from the state for positions, and not all of our positions, but some of the positions are state funded. The new positions for the new building, we can ask about 45 days out from when we move into the building for that funding. So we will have to go before the compensation board and get on their agenda and request that funding, but it is in their budget for us this year. We also have been working on a body scanner. I don't know, Colonel, do you want to give the background?
Yeah, we started looking at the body scanner Unfortunately, we had 2 deaths in the jail here. It was related to drugs being hidden in the wrong places. So we started, looking at the body scanners, and we've gone through the process. The committee was put together. They went and visited several jails, and now we're at that point to move forward. Someone comes in and they'll go through the scanner. It will not actually show the drugs, but it will show something of a dark type spot that we have to take a look at and go forward, because it's a big problem in jails all over the United States. We also got a mail scanner because people were putting the drugs in the mail. So they try every little thing to get the drugs in here. So and certainly what the opioid users are trying to do is get Suboxone sent in, because that helps with their withdrawals. And we have started issuing Suboxone. We've just started getting into that process. So the scanner will be great. We need it. Most jails have it. And Carol, what was the total price of that?
So the total price of the winning bid was 149,000. That's 119,000 for the actual unit, and then there is installation, training, and maintenance on top of that for a total of 149,000. So we would ask for the board's approval to move forward with that purchase.
In other words, you're saying that the body scanner will enhance security of processing inmates when they come into jail?
Correct.
And even the ones that were here, you may have to do it as well.
That's true.
Good, good. Can I get a motion to approve the purchase of the body scanner?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Debbie, could you call the roll on that, please?
Austin,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Weimer,
Aye.
Guzman,
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
King,
Aye.
Costelecki, Lennox, Smith, Torres.
Aye.
Unanimous, sir.
Thank you.
And in addition, the jail board does approve our professional services contracts, our medical services, our physicians and psychiatrists that see the inmates is one of those contracts, and that we are just completing the negotiations and have been through the bid process with the county on that. We have extended that so that we can continue that process, and we'll be providing that to the board at the next scheduled meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
question for Colonel Melides. I may have misunderstood. You said something about mail scanner as well. Do we have that? Do we plan to?
We have it.
Okay, great.
We did purchase that.
Thank you.
And if you'll turn,
Can I ask, so if I wanted to obtain over the course of some time, and not today, because I didn't come here looking for this today, I'd like to obtain some more information about the history of the SCAP program and the in and out money, what we spend on inmates that's supportive of that, and what those applications look like. Is that appropriately directed to this lady?
Yes, what I do, I would get with Carol, and you want more
I'll do that.
information
I'll
about it?
send you an email. I just wanted to make sure that was the right way to do it. I'd just like to get additional information about the program and the history of it.
That'll be fine. It's a lot, as a new
I
member.
know.
One of the things I mentioned a little bit earlier was something we want to do at our next meeting. It's a lot to get at a meeting and to learn about different functions of how the commissary works, what is legal, how we spend the money. It's not taxpayer dollars, but we are by code how we can spend that money, such as like the workforce. We can actually buy workforce equipment and the clothes they wear with the commissary money. So there's a lot of things that work that need to be explained to the board. So hopefully every meeting you'll be able to pick up something that we're doing. Okay.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Good. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss if I don't bring this up, but a term was used as illegal aliens. And that terminology is extremely offensive for immigrants.
Okay.
Many organizations don't ever use it again. They rather refer as undocumented immigrants or unauthorized immigrants. So, as a person who, it's part of that community, I would prefer if we don't use that term, and I can provide information that is available to the public
Okay.
on why that terminology is extremely offensive.
And, you know, I would just prefer to change that on that conversation if possible.
I see no problem in talking to staff when we make that correction. It
Thank you,
just said, that's the way the form is filled out. That's the way the state code is. It has not been corrected, state code, so we just present, as it's presented in the code and as we get the form, but we will make that change.
Thank
All
you,
right.
sir. I
We will.
appreciate it.
That's it. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly subscribe what he has told.
Okay.
And the proper term is undocumented immigrant.
Okay.
Obviously have no documentation to be in the United States, but it's not either illegal, because that's a civil penalty for not being here without proper documentation. And second, those things about aliens are like, not human, like from some other place. So the proper term would be undocumented immigrant. And that's a term that we accept and most people, when they're referred to illegal aliens, kind of take it as a pejorative kind of term towards them, when there is a proper term that is undocumented immigrant.
Is that something you, Ms. Goodwin?
What is that? Yeah.
Is that something you? All right. I want to make sure everybody agrees to it.
Yeah,
All right.
of course.
All right. All right. So we will make that correction. We'll still make that correction.
Absolutely. If you'll turn to page 35. This is our operating expenditure budget status for fiscal year 2020. I think what I'll note in there, if you look at the budgeted savings for our salaries, those were normally 1.1,269,680. The county, as a result of COVID, reduced that by 2 million. So we did actually go over our expenditure budget, but that's basically because that money was given to the county to support operations. So we did have ample savings. We also were under restrictions for any discretionary spending, so we were able to save quite a bit. And so we were able to cover that in our operations balance. So as far as COVID-19, we did get support from the County Emergency Operations Center. And as far as in our budget items that we purchased for COVID, the supplies and other things totaled between expenditures and encumbrances, $67,689. So unless anybody has any questions, move on to page 36. We also have the revenue budget and our collections for the county. We have it's separated by inmate revenue, other revenue, governmental revenue, and the owning jurisdictions. Right now, we're going to be short an estimate of about $660,000 in our revenue, which we need to make up the money that we didn't spend on our expenditure side. We'll cover that. And right now, with these numbers are still developing. Manassas at the end of fiscal year 20 had an 11.3% participation rate, which is what we use to settle the books with them, and those numbers are still developing. But right now, in the 22,425 owed by the city to us has now changed to 21,705 since the report was done. That includes our operating budget, a portion of the main jail repairs that have started so far in security systems, and part of our overhead. So we are in the process of working that out with the city. And those numbers were provided to them late last week. Our fiscal year 21 budget is just over $53 million. That's all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
Question for Carol. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Next, we will have our 2020 statutory provisions that's relevant to deals, I guess, that was passed by the General Assembly.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Want to make sure everyone, does everyone have their
There's
copy?
an updated copy, an additional one that was in your package, if you need, if anybody need it. It's updated to include some additional bills that Jeff was interested in having you see. I'm not gonna go through all of these in the interest of time. I'm just gonna point you to a couple of them, mainly related to jails themselves and not to more general functions. SB 215 relating to preparation of reports by the Board of Corrections acknowledges concern about the number of deaths in some local correctional facilities. And that will be done on an annual basis. SB 622, in addition to renaming the State Board of Corrections, the language that's underlined to me is fairly obvious, and with respect to if a determination is made the local correctional facility is not in compliance with minimum standards, then notice is given to that correctional facility. There has not been a reluctance to give that notice previously to renaming the board. So fortunately, we don't get many of those. With respect to HB 1328 and SB 656, this facilitates treatment of inmates in correctional facilities by allowing the provision of information from a healthcare provider that was previously assisting that inmate in providing that inmate to the, providing that information to the facility to ensure a continuity of care. HB 1284 addresses some of the concerns that you've heard in the news with respect to use of isolated confinement. The Board of Corrections will be reviewing standards in that regard. HB 1093 and 1467 speak to assistance to prisoners who are about to be released and the jail's ability to assist them in obtaining government issued identification and how to apply for that. Furloughs are mainly under HB 369, is to make sure that if a person is furloughed in one program and it's not in the same jurisdiction for that regional jail, that the other regional jail whose jurisdiction it's in is aware of the furlough. HB 278 changes from mandatory to optional charging for the cost of participating in a home or electronic incarceration program. SB 307 allows for good conduct credit to be accrued as opposed to, excuse me, I was skipping to the next one. I don't want to skip. Good conduct credit at a rate of 1 day for each day served. And then the next one, SB 736, allows for credits against fines and court costs by allowing community service performance, which will help inmates that are indigent or need some additional funding in order to pay their fines and court costs. I'm not going to take you through all the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act bills, but I do want to focus you on HB 321 at the bottom of page 3. I will mention this in the context of the restated bylaws because it's an optional provision. With respect to missing meetings of a public body, there is a provision in the code now that allows for a member to say they have a medical condition that prevents them from attending, and this bill would allow them also to include missing a meeting due to a serious medical condition of an immediate family member. So we can talk about whether or not you want to incorporate that as an optional provision in the restated bylaws. And then there's a limit of 2 per calendar year or 10% of the meetings with respect to using that quote unquote reason for not attending. I'm not going to take you through the other legislation. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them, or I'll have my associate Zach Packer who put this together advise you.
Any questions for Ms. Panek concerning some of the legislation that affects jails?
Yes, I think I emailed Colonel Melekis about the House Bill 1150.
Yeah, 1150 relates to the ability to inquire with respect to, let me pull it out, with respect to citizenship of inmates. And it makes it clear that the provisions in the code that allow for those determinations of citizenship of inmates taken into custody or any other person committed, and the duty of a clerk of court with respect to committing a convicted alien, and that's the language in the statute, I'm sorry, is limited to felony offenses. So that provision. Anything else I can respond to if you spoke to it?
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Sandberg? Another question from Ms. Sandberg concerning the new laws. All right, thank you, Ms. Sandberg. We'll move on to the jail board reinstated bylaw.
Okay, and you have some optional provisions that I will address in front of you as well that will impact students tonight. I'm going to turn to what's a draft that's marked it's June 11th. Does everybody have their copy of the bylaws? This and then it's in the topic. And you have the optional provisions that I mentioned. We have a set of bylaws, and I only brought them. I brought them to show you. You should have a copy because Debbie sent them to you when you became a member. I think they were done on mimeograph paper. If people remember mimeograph. We do not know when they were exactly adopted. Maybe in the late 80s. But they have not been amended since that time. One of my views, and you all can either adopt it or not, is that we should go to restated bylaws. And then if things come up that need to be addressed by the bylaws, we shouldn't wait like 30 plus years in order to try to collect all of the changes at one time. Unless a lot of you are planning on staying for that period of time. If you, on the restated bylaws, they are in more detail than the original bylaws. They also are updated in order to address updated sections of the Code of Virginia, which are largely in Title 53.1 with respect to jail boards. There are some provisions that relate to Freedom of Information Act requirements. There's one, I believe, that I touched on that relates to Conflict of Interest Act requirements. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to go through each provision of this? Do you want to take questions?
I think we can take questions.
Or concerns about the restated bylaws? Maybe both ways.
I forwarded something to Ms. Adani like 5 minutes before the meeting, so I'm sorry.
I didn't get it.
I'm sure you didn't. There were what I think are just typographical errors in a couple of places where the wrong section is referenced. It looks like it's pretty obvious it's the wrong section. It's meant to be one thing. On page 3, 6.1E is references 5.2, 5.3. I think that actually 6.2 and 6.3 is what's being referenced. And then the same thing on page 4.
You know, that may be the case. There was a new section there and may not have transferred. Thanks for telling me.
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem. And second, it's the next page after that, the index, same thing. It should, I think you mean 6.2 and not 5.2 there. And then the last thing that I would ask the membership to think about is in the last Article 5, Section 4.2, it references to whom the annual report should be submitted. I would ask the Public Defender's Office to be added to that list of entities that receives that annual report in the same way that the Commonwealth Attorney, the County Executive, the judges, I think that it's appropriate to have the Public Defender added to that unless there's an objection.
I certainly have no objection.
No.
Okay. Any other questions? Susan?
I don't think I have that document. It says draft across the,
That was in
Should
your,
be in your board package.
it was in your board packet for last, in June.
oh, okay. All right, I didn't bring that with me, so that's fine.
Mr. Chair, the two papers that we received.
Yes.
I'm gonna take you to those next.
So we're gonna-
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Lisa, I did not bring an extra copy of the 6.
That's okay, I have it.
Want to make sure we send you another
Yeah.
copy?
No, I'll check for it, and if I need it, I'll.
And then
contact
we'll
Sam.
send you, if you approve, if the board approves these tonight, we'll send you a cleaned up version, so.
Oh, we'll bring it to the next meeting. And then have to copy for the-
Oh, sure, okay, that sounds good. Let me take you to the additional pages that Mr. Forrest mentioned. These sort of half sheets.
There's two, correct?
Yes, sir, there are two. The first one relates to an inclusion in section 4 regarding cancellation of meetings. I think questions came up with respect to the cancellation of the meeting. And we thought it would be useful so that there's no confusion in the future to just put a provision in the bylaws regarding the process for canceling a meeting so that everybody was on board. And the suggestion I have in here, since there are no requirements that I can think of anywhere to absolutely make the board do it a certain way, is to allow the chair to cancel a meeting after consultation with the vice chair and the secretary. And then certainly provide notice to the board members, post the notice, and on the website, which would be the same place where the notice of the meeting occurring would go. So that's the addition of 4.3, if you want to include that. The second one is with respect to decorum. The current bylaws, the 1988, whatever year bylaws, don't have a provision regarding decorum. The proposed restated bylaws don't have a provision regarding decorum. But it occurred to me that maybe it would be appropriate to include a provision regarding the maintenance of decorum. There is a case out of Chesterfield relating to a planning commission in which it was key to the ability of a person who was clearly creating a disturbance in the room for the chair to remove that person, that there was a provision in their bylaws that allowed for the maintenance of decorum. So that's why I thought maybe you should consider that. As I was joking to the superintendent, I would certainly not be inclined to create a distraction in the middle of the jail at a jail board meeting, but maybe there are people who are inclined to do that. And so maybe it's worthwhile to have a process by which, as this indicates, that members are to maintain decorum and address remarks through the chair, which is fairly consistent with Robert's Rules of Order. And then other people in the room who are at the meeting have to maintain decorum. If they are asked by the chair or told by the chair they're out of order, they have to correct. And if not, then the chair can take steps to remove that person. And then the second paragraph of subsection B again addresses the issue of how to remove someone who is failing to respond to requests from the chair to terminate speaking if their time is over and there's a time limit on the amount they're allowed to speak, and or otherwise being disruptive in the room when they haven't been recognized. So I pose those to you. I actually pretty much plagiarized these from the Boyd County Supervisors, decorum provisions. They look a little different in the board's rules because they're double spaced and they refer to Board of Supervisors, but that's largely where I took them from.
Can I ask you a question about what is able to be done? Do our rules or our bylaws permit us to conduct let's say that the chair decided that a meeting should be canceled and he notices the board of that, this is why, here's what I want to do. Is there a mechanism whereby the board, be it email, which is essentially what happened this time, came back and said, we'd like to have the meeting anyway, such that a quorum, the chairman could, that the cancellation would not happen. Is there a way for the board to participate in a decision of cancellation via email, which is what I'm experiencing with things like the Portland County Bar Association?
Yeah, probably not, because the issue then becomes whether you are voting by email and whether that is permitted under the Freedom of Information Act, which the Bar Association is not.
I understand.
Not
That's why I was
covered by it,
asking you.
So that's why I
Exactly
tried to
this.
put into place
Yeah.
something that is more than just the chairman, consulting with the vice chair and the secretary, before rendering a decision to cancel a meeting. That doesn't mean that, I suppose, although it gets quite confusing, that the chair and, again, consulting with the officers doesn't change it from a
Right.
cancellation to holding a meeting,
Right.
but you have to be concerned there about what the public is seeing in terms of notification and consistency and credibility of the report of the information that's going out about whether or not a meeting is going to occur.
If 7 members or 6 members of this board are on a telephone call together, thereby constituting a quorum, and those 6 members decide, we've done that way.
You would have a quorum, you also have an illegal meeting.
Again, I'm asking, because I don't have the answers. to
Yeah,
this question.
that's the problem, is under FOIA, if more than 2 of you all gather together to discuss business, or in discussing business, if you're otherwise gathered together, then it's a meeting that has to meet certain standards on the Freedom of Information.
And is that because it's outside of the normally constructed scheduled meeting?
No,
That it falls under.
it would be either way. The kicker is really the more than 2 or 3 or more creates a meeting. So the meeting to discuss whether or not to have a meeting would in fact be a discussion of the public business of meeting and would be covered by FOIA.
Right, I do understand that it would be covered by FOIA. I guess what I'm wondering is what causes that to be unlawful under FOIA? Because it wasn't already scheduled, like.
Well, it's not, you would have to make it public. You'd have to give notice of that conversation. It begins, even though the subject may be relatively a small subject, it's still, that's not the
Right.
issue. FOIA doesn't depend on the subject other than public business.
Right, got it.
Yeah, sorry, that's.
That's okay. I'm not as well versed in FOIA as you are.
No, I appreciate that, and I guess I do want to make some comment about FOIA and COIA after we finish this, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, but I think that what I would say is that the chairman is not limited in contacting the vice chair and the secretary with respect to the opinion about whether or not to cancel a meeting. If you can do what is called daisy chaining, that's a colloquial term under the Freedom of Information Act, and you could in fact, contact individual members of the board and say, what do you think about going forward with the meeting? So, and that's legal, that's perfectly.
Mr. Chair, 2 things. Number one, I've seen public bodies that actually have the power to call for special meetings.
Mhm.
And will the chair only has the power to call for a special meeting, or will the board members will have the power to call for a special meeting?
If I can direct you to, if you would, to the top of page 2. There is under section 3, special and emergency meetings. It says special meetings the board may be called by or at the request of the chair when an emergency or other good reason exists necessitating such meeting.
But that's a chair that can call a special
That's
meeting.
correct. But certainly a board member could say, we have a serious emergency here to the chair. And the chair could recognize that in fact there's an emergency.
The second question that I had is, should there be reasons for canceling a meeting? Or just canceling a meeting?
Let me answer it this way, and then it becomes maybe a broader discussion of the board. You are required by the Freedom of Information Act to publish your regular meeting calendar every year. And that allows both you all, staff, the public at large to ascertain when the meeting's going to be and to plan. So one of the things I would think that the chair would consider in terms of canceling a meeting is the disruption of not using the regular meeting schedule, and is there a good cause?
But should that be there as part of the frame of the cancellation trust? Like
You certainly could talk about that. I'm telling you that I think that you probably ought to have a provision that allows for cancellation. If,
so the
if
way
you
it
want
reads,
to,
it's I want to cancel and that's it. And
That's
I
correct.
just talked to the vice chair and the secretary and I cancel
Mhm.
without giving any reason or being limited by anything.
well, then the board might want to discuss if that's a concern, whether you want to put in there for good cause.
I might add that, I've been associated with the jail and jail board for 38 years. And the only time that we have council meetings has been because of inclement weather. This year, we canceled meetings because of COVID-19. But other than that, we have had jail boards, and other than snowstorms or hurricanes or whatever we had, that's the only time that we have canceled meetings.
Which probably talks about some emergency situation. And that might be written up in the, because both COVID and inclement weather are kind of emergency situations.
I look for guidance from you as to whether you want to put a reason in there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
may I ask the reasoning for the change? What is the change needed? Because maybe then we can understand what problem are we trying to fix by doing this change.
The inclusion of a provision to allow for cancellation would make clear, because there was some concern when the chairman canceled the last meeting that whether or not he had the authority to do it. So I think it is useful to have a provision in light of that, that allows for a cancellation. Now, whether you want to include that there has to be a reason for the cancellation is an additional question.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that based on Charles' recommendation, that we just include the language for good cause. And then that seems to cover any emergency situation that might arise and gives you the latitude that you need to address those situations, so that anybody that might be interested in the meeting would readily know that it was for a good cause and not just because you felt like it was.
Any
That seems
objection
like
for-
reasonable language.
Any objection for what Major Holman just
I
said?
would, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I like the language for emergency reasons better than for a good cause.
But would that exclude if we didn't have a quorum? If we don't have a quorum, we have to call off the meeting, and that's not an emergency.
That's correct. That would not be emergency.
But that would not be covered. This section wouldn't cover non-quorums anyway. That's not the purpose of this section, I don't think, is it, Ms. Panda?
Well, you can't have a meeting if there's no quorum, so what would happen is, theoretically, it's never happened, is that everybody who could come would show up and everybody look around and go, oh, that's right, we have no quorum.
But what we
And then
usually
you go
do,
home, what?
I'm sorry, but what we usually do is we
Yeah.
send an email before the
You're right,
meeting and
that's
say,
correct,
are you
send-
coming?
yeah.
And if we don't have a quorum, then we cancel
Right.
in
So we
time to
could
give
put it,
people
yeah, I
notice.
think that's a good point, Jack. Maybe put in there, depending on whether or not you want to put in something that caveats the reason, put in also, or if there is no quorum.
The difference is that this is preemptive. This is canceling the meeting in advance. And I think that's substantially different than it's canceled because there's not a quorum. And I agree with Mr. Bailey. I would prefer, and Chair Billy, you've been doing this a really, really long time, but God willing, you're not going to be the chairman in 20 years.
Who knows? How do you know that?
Eventually, you're going to retire. So,
Okay.
but
and
that's all. I would prefer language about, in case of emergency, preemptively cancel. I agree that in terms of lack of quorum, then that's going to be a different situation. cancellation. It's not a preemptive cancellation in the sense of, you know.
Can I suggest this so that we can get through this in terms of process?
Yes.
If there are any other questions with respect to provisions in this document, we can talk about them, and then that there be a motion to approve the bylaws, and if there's a disagreement with respect to 4.3 and whether it should say one set of language or another set of language, we deal with that as a separate amendment and then adopt the whole thing. Does that make sense in terms of process?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Well, let me see if there are any other questions or concerns. And if it only relates to 4.3, then let's take a motion with respect to either, it can happen one two ways, either respect to the bylaws, approval of the bylaws with particular language on 4.3. And if there is a disagreement, then you can vote on 4.3 and then you can vote on the whole bylaws. Does that work? Or we can vote on whole bylaws first with the exception of 4.3 and add it in or out. Okay. My greatest concern candidly is you need a new set of bylaws really badly. And there may be disagreement, as to which way to go on 4.3. And I'd like to get you to an approval of the basic bylaws, and then if the issue on cancellation meeting, carve that out.
So could I get a motion to approve the bylaws in exception of the 4.3?
Mr. Chairman, I also, on the decorum part, on the 7.7 for the bylaws, I just, coming from a good place, I don't recall us mentioning any time frame for when you have to participate. So, and it states here that if you speak over a minute, so I'm afraid that we haven't set the ground rules for participation, and we're limiting the participation without knowing, the length of time that it's announced or so. So I would like to add to exempt this change as well as we discuss further this change.
Okay, so maybe you pull out 7.7. Let me just address that if I might for a moment. If you look at page 4 of the restated bylaws, section 7.1C, you are not required to have public comment time. So I put in optional parentheses, but the proposed language is a maximum of 3 non-board members may speak on a matter for 3 minutes on a first come basis. So if somebody comes in, to use the quorum provision, if somebody comes in and they will not sit down after 3 minutes, they insist on continuing to speak, then what the decorum provision allows the chair to do is say, you have 1 minute to sum up. So now they are at 4 minutes, even though they only have 3. And if they refuse to quit talking after that, then the chairman would say, you're violating the rules, you're to stop. If they will not stop talking, and it's hard to believe that would happen within this group, but it does happen in other groups. Then the chairman could have that person removed from the meeting. Never want to get to that, but that's the purpose of it.
A follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. Just so I understand, so we are trying to fix a problem that has not happened in this specific board, but a different meeting. And I would say that I haven't seen any type of public comments. This is the second meeting that I participate, and usually the public comments have been submitted online. So I'm afraid to tell the public I'm setting rules without inviting them to participate first. I haven't seen that interaction, and I do understand that there are problems at other boards or commissions, but I'm afraid to take action on something that is not a problem relevant to this board, Mr. Chair.
And that's worth thinking about. I would tell you that in the public comments you got last month, there was a significant discussion as to whether to include the comment that was profane.
Oh, but that's not specific to this board.
Well, yes, this board. amongst the comments, if you go to the website, amongst the comments in there is a profane comment. Now, maybe that person would not have said that if they were here in front of you. Or maybe they wouldn't even come to the meeting. But that would be an example of where the chair, the chair could say, without anything, you are being inappropriate. But my concern is because of First Amendment issues and
Right.
the provisions, particularly with this federal case that talks about how you do this, that you should have a provision that addresses decorum so that everybody knows coming into the meeting that their expectations is that they conduct themselves with decorum. And so that example was one that actually caused us to think about whether or not we should suggest to you that you include a decorum provision because, and I said, because I erred on the side of First Amendment, to let that comment go out in there, even though I thought it was an embarrassment. And we had no rules on decorum. So that's the background.
If I may, you proposed the bylaw changes to bring us up to date to a modern bylaw board of directors policy. This policy that you proposed are very similar to those by both the city of Manassas and the county board of supervisors.
With respect to decorum, I have to say I didn't go and match up.
To both, but I believe you said you went to the county. To me, it doesn't prevent it. And I would hope that as a board or as the chairperson, if there was someone who wanted to, knowing ahead of time, they had a 5-minute presentation. They reached out to the chairperson and says, I have a 5-minute presentation. He can allow that. It's how City of Manassas City Council does it. If they are going to go beyond the 3 minutes, they ask for permission from the mayor, and it's a he right now, grants that and extends their time to their requested 5 minutes or 10-minute presentation that they tell us ahead of time. My concern that is if we don't have something like this, yes, it's never happened. It could happen tonight. Someone could walk in, completely disrupt the meeting, not allow us to conduct the business at hand because they're too disruptive, and we have nothing in place to prevent that. This would prevent that.
That was the goal.
That's yes. But if someone wants to speak beyond that time, certainly I would hope that we would do that. And I think we're paying you to draft these things in the most modern, professional manner and take your advice for that.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, the Chief Keen is correct. There are ways to deal with longer presentation, both in advance, because you want to, if somebody wants to make it longer, then you want to make sure you're equitable to whoever else, which could include that many times asking people to submit their comments in writing and orally, so that they do not consume an additional amount of time when the board meetings have been planned to allow for them to progress on a certain schedule. And then, so if somebody has written a dissertation on a particular issue, there's nothing that prevents them from providing it to you in writing. And the advantage, there will be some who are disadvantages as well, but the advantage of your allowing written comment last month instead of verbal comment because of COVID was that there were some people who wrote quite a lot that if you were using a 3-minute time frame, they would not have been able to speak all of those comments. They might have said, and in addition, here are my written comments or something else. So the purpose is not to inhibit people from providing with information, but to have them provided to you in a manner that allows you to conduct your meetings in an orderly way, and also in a way that allows you to have some sense of timing as to how your meetings are going to be conducted.
You know, in a sense of fairness to what the chief was talking about, if we had a meeting where we had 1 or 2 people that wanted to speak to us, and one person wanted to talk 4 minutes, and I think if we gave one person 4 minutes and the other person wanted 4 minutes, it would be fair to give both of them 4 minutes. So I think to have it in the policy, the way it's written, I think we should adopt it that way. But I think as chair, if we get people to come before the board, they want to talk longer than that, we have to stick to this. But if you give one person longer time, we should give everybody the same time.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
so a couple of things. When I first read through the proposed 7.7, it appeared very benign to me. But during the discussion now, I've become mildly alarmed. First of all, I am extremely offended by public profanity and some private profanity. However, this is one of those issues that I know up close and personal that the Prince William County Board of Supervisors is wrestling with. I think I heard that, and perhaps I just heard it wrong filter, that part of the reason for 7.7 was dealing with the possible use of profanity from someone. Is
What it's described in here as indecorum behavior, indecorous conduct process. So it doesn't go specifically to all profanity. And at the risk of giving you an example, if somebody were to say something like damn, then it may be that people are not generally offended by that, and the matter goes on. But if somebody had a string of profanities that were quite obscene, then that may be not considered to be decorous behavior. And particularly for this forum. Now, maybe something that they would have in conversations with their friends or relatives or others for whatever reason, but for a jail board meeting, I cannot immediately think how that would be appropriate behavior. So the answer
and neither can I.
The chair could say, I'm sorry, that's not appropriate. Would you please cease your comments? And it could be something other than profanity that could be indecorous behavior. That could be somebody comes in who starts yelling and flailing and just creating a general disturbance. So there are examples of that. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, they're usually in outlying jurisdictions and not here. But
yeah.
But there have been occasions where the chair needs to be clear to everybody that the chair has ability to say that has to stop. And I'm directing you to stop it as inappropriate. If you do not stop it, then you will need to exit the meeting.
Okay, I'm just a little concerned. Obviously, the intent is noble and righteous, and I have no qualms with it. But I am I'm considering Delegate Guzman's premise. Are we trying to solve a problem that has not occurred? The chief, yes, we should try to anticipate possible problems and prevent those as well. This one is a tough one for me, and just speaking freely as an ordained minister, yet a protector of First Amendment rights. This is a slippery slope.
And I agree with you that the chair needs to be very judicious in how such a provision is used, and having both advised many governing bodies, not just the jail board, but governing bodies that have had to deal with very contentious hearings. You try to avoid having anybody removed from a meeting. I remember sort of lockstepping somebody out as I chatted with them who was creating a huge issue, because having a police officer take that person out would probably have been worse. And it actually worked. I was magic. I was just like, the force was with me that night. Because that person had been forcibly removed previously, because the person simply could not control himself in a public forum.
And that's what I was referring to. I've only been doing it 30 years. I can only remember 2 cases that we've had that with the city council on both times. One, people that I happen to know, addiction and mental health issues, but their comments, they were just strings of irrational comments where they refused to stop. So that's more what I'm talking about. And I agree. I'm a big First Amendment guy. I believe in it 100%. I believe it's the first one for a reason. So I think it is a slippery slope, but I think we also have to have some trust that we are going to be judicious. So I hear exactly what you're saying.
Mr. Sherman?
Ms. Goodman?
Mr. Chairman, number one, I want to make clear that I'm not in favor of profanity. And I am not, doubting the skills, from the county attorney on what language we have to use. I think that I have been watching different board meetings and county board of supervisors meetings where it has been at the prerogative of the chair whether to have the number of people participating on the meeting, having a time in that, or telling the person not to speak. There's so many things that are not written, but that the chair is able to do anytime there is a misconduct going on within a meeting. And that doesn't have to be written. It's just the authority of the chair. So it doesn't have to be written that if somebody is here using profanity, you could say, we can no longer speak with you because you are disrespecting the board member. And I would cordially ask you to leave the meeting. And if the person refuses, then we have the police here and the person can escort the person out. That has happened multiple times in the county board of supervisors, from the time that I recall. What I'm afraid here is number one, the First Amendment rights, and second, where we're trying to move forward in a place where we want the public to get access to us. When we are promoting accessibility, when we are promoting transparency and accountability, and we will have 0 shows today of public participation. And instead of inviting the public, we are saying, hey, you are not coming, but we're setting these rules in case you decide to come. It's just not, from my point of view, I don't think it's a good narrative. I'm from a person that I have seen that many meetings happen, without notifying the public. I'm uncomfortable to vote for something like this today.
Can I just make 2 points? One is factually, the Board of Supervisors has this in their bylaws and rules of procedure, so the chair can exercise it. And the second reason is that by putting it in your bylaws, you put people on notice of their expectations, so that it's the expectation of the board, which is important because people need to be given notice before you can proceed to even contemplate conducting them from a meeting. And that leads to my point about the lawsuit I mentioned, in which the court pointed to there were rules, people had them, they were on notice of what those rules are because the bylaws are available to them, and they failed to conduct themselves in accordance with the rules. So those are my 3 reasons for saying it. Having said that, it's your choice whether you want to include a provision such as this in your bylaws.
Mr. Chair, if you include a provision, it should be a lot more watered down than so much detail as you have it here. You should give the expectations of anybody that comes here that they should behave in a way that they will not use profanity or disrupt or do things like that, basic. Not to get into so much detail of the first time, second time, third time, this is gonna happen. Because that's what make it like lot of difficult to enforce, give a lot of discretion to the chair in a sense of what is a cursing, what is profanity? What is profanity to you may not be to me. There's a lot of people there that are just uneducated and they use the F word here and there, not with the purpose of a profanity, but because that's the way they talk. That's the way I know a lot of young people that cannot talk 1 minute without saying S or F constantly in their discourse, because that's the way they are, that's the way they talk. So in order to, it's kind of a lazy expectation like I would say that everybody expects that somebody that comes here that will respect and address the chair, and that their comments will not have profanity or be disruptive, etc. Basic things, and leave it at that, rather than being so regulated that causes all this dislike or confusion. Make it benign, put it that way, as using the word of Reverend Bailey. Making something that establish an expectation, but does not really go after you, like telling you, we're gonna kick you out here if you use the F word. You might or you might not. That will be or not disruptive conduct depending on the context of what things are said.
What it says here, if I might, just to the end of first paragraph of B, if out of order remarks or other indecorous conduct persists, the chair may order the speaker to cease speaking. And then the important thing is, before you can remove anybody, you need to let them to know that they face the possibility of being removed if they fail to listen to the direction of the chair. And that's why the other language is in there. It says if the order is not heeded, the chair will then cause the appropriate staff to carry out the order. And even though the chair right now is the sheriff, I do not think that it would be conducive to the order of this board to have the sheriff have to use his police powers to remove somebody. So it will probably be somebody on staff to do it. I hope.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'm not sure if it'll make anyone more comfortable, but as someone who has been on the board for a few years, as have others in the room, we have a chair who we have all elected because we appreciate that he is responsible enough to use his discretion appropriately. And sitting at this table for 3 years, I have witnessed many people come to speak to our board, and he has always been exceedingly polite, welcoming. I don't think I've ever seen him cut anyone off on their speaking time, even when maybe they should have been. And if the chair, whoever that may be, was inappropriate, then we fix that and we get a new chair. But I have seen this board embrace public comment, even when it's hard to hear. I have never seen anything even approaching an abuse of discretion by the chair. And I think looking at this section for our bylaws and removing the fact that we have a chair who we have elected, who is a human being, and just looking at it as cold and not human, is not the right way to look at it. I personally, when we were considering certain issues recently, I was concerned that if we had public comment, it would become abusive to the board. It would become abusive to individuals. And from what Ms. Pandak is telling us, if we don't have this in our bylaws, we just have to sit here and take it or get sued. So I would rather set expectations from the moment someone walks in the door, so they understand this is how we do things. You may curse up a storm on the street, but that's not how we do it in this room, and you need to communicate appropriately with us, and we will listen to what you say. If we don't set that expectation, we're setting up the public for failure in communicating with us, and we're putting ourselves at risk for being sued, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question, because when we were talking about the quorum, and we talk about situations that happen at the County Board of Supervisors, I think that's what I heard earlier. So what I heard recently is that these already exist in the County Board of Supervisors meetings bylaws.
That's correct.
And it still happens, that profanity still happens, that disrespecting still happens. Is that accurate?
I don't watch most of the board meetings, but I have seen some of that happen. The answer is.
I watch them all, yes.
Is whether the board and the chair have decided whether or not it is appropriate to let those comments go on or not.
That's not what you're asking though, is it?
No, what I ask is that, so when I ask this question, what are we trying to fix? And I was told that this situation happened at different boards, including the county board of supervisors. And then later we heard that this already exists in the bylaws of the county board of supervisors. And I watched the last two meetings and they were really hard. I mean, thank God I'm not there. But,
And
you know,
that is-
so if
yeah.
I'm just, you know, trying to bring up here is that a written rule here is not gonna change a person's behavior. A person who wants to use profanity, even if it's written, is gonna come here, and it has happened recently in the county board of supervisors. So I just, you know, as we were discussing earlier, that, you know, we want to empower the chairs, so when we publish the date of the meetings, people know in advance when these meetings happen. And then I'm just afraid that we are trying to tell, you know, if you're trying to plan and participate and express your voice here, you know, make sure, you know, you are not allowed to. And we don't know what is expressed in your mind. What it might be disrespectful for me may not be disrespectful to you. I mean, it just happened. I mean, when we were using a word, right? So it happens. So I'm just, I don't know, maybe I haven't been there. Once again, this is my second time. I haven't seen any disrespect, and we all here civilly. We respect each other. I don't see what we're trying to fix right here in this room. That's the point that I wanted to make.
Mr. Chairman,
I'll come back to you.
Mr. Chairman, I guess listening to Ms. Pandak, I think maybe the problem that we're trying to fix is that our bylaws are out of date and they don't include some things that would be standard for other similar bodies. And so just in response to that part of your statement, I feel like that's what we're trying to fix. And while our bylaws and our standards for decorum may not actually shape anyone's behavior once they're here and speaking to us, they shape our response.
Major?
Sure. I think this particular section would allow for two things. First, it would allow for the chair to take action should somebody become, for lack of a better term, disorderly in a meeting like this while you're trying to conduct business. It is the chair's responsibility, decision to ascertain what is decorum and what is not. Having attended some of those Board of County Supervisors meetings, and most recently last week, I can tell you that we have had a lot of discussions with the chair of the Board of Supervisors, and it is her desire to allow the types of speech and actions that you see to continue, even though these provisions exist within the bylaws. So that is kind of the chair's discretion. But I would caution by leaving it to, if you amend this and leave it too open-ended, if there should come a time where you do want somebody removed by not outlining the protocol by which that should happen, will create even further problems. So this is rather putting a procedure in place that makes it very clear to somebody, hey, if you get the warning from the chair, your behavior is out of order and you need to stop talking, then this is what happens next. You're outlining action and consequence, and that is fair to everybody. And it prevents somebody from coming in and suggesting that the chair maybe treated them differently than they would another person, simply because of maybe what they were saying or what they looked like or where they lived or something of that nature, but rather outlines for everybody. This is how everybody that comes into this room that wants to provide speech or comments or suggestions or whatever it is, this is how everybody's going to be treated. And so if you feel then, if this board then feels that the chair may have acted inappropriately, well then, I think there's other provisions to deal with that outside of the meeting. But certainly, I believe that if you leave it open and you don't have anything, if you wait until something becomes a problem, well, you're already behind. And so by including this, as was mentioned, into what is kind of standard decorum rules for most boards and the way they conduct business, it allows this board to continue to conduct their business. It makes it very clear to anybody that might want to come what the expectation is. You can't define profanity any more than you can necessarily define pornography. But it's kind of a sense based on the speech that is being given. And you have to allow the chair a little bit of decision points regarding that. But if you remove the part about the consequence and how that will happen, I think then that's putting this entire board in a predicament that perhaps we don't want to be in when if somebody does come in and create such a disturbance.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that question, is this the same language that's in the Constitution bylaws for the Board of Supervisors?
It is largely the same. I had to amend it to deal with the issue of this being a jail board as opposed to Board of Supervisors, and I also have changed it where it says the chair will then cause the appropriate staff to carry out the order. As I recollect in the Board of Supervisors bylaws, it talks about bringing someone in to remove the person.
Okay.
That's really, is that the end of the question?
Yes.
I just want to know, what are the legal consequences of this Act if the chair has to stop someone from speaking, have them removed, and we don't have this bylaw provision there? Is it easier for us to defend ourselves legally with the bylaw provision?
That is correct. That is my reason for putting it in there, so it is more defensible. If in fact you have to take the extreme steps of removing somebody from the meeting. My problem was that I gave it to my secretary to take off of, and
It's okay,
she didn't
Ms.
give it
Canada. I
back to
trust
me.
your
I'm
memory.
sorry.
That was good enough.
I'm missing that page. I do apologize.
No worries.
But yes, that's where I just simply adapted it so it was the jail board as opposed to I did not change the language with respect to the key terms of out of order remarks or indecorous conduct, or you have 1 minute left, or this is what happens next. All of that is from the board.
Mr. Chairman, what is your suggestions or guidance on how we move forward
I
now?
think what we should do is go ahead and vote on the bylaws and exclude these two, and we vote on these two separate.
So moved.
Any question?
And we'll make the changes that
Yes.
Ms. Lennox had mentioned.
We will.
Okay, just clean it up.
All in favor?
Aye.
Deborah, please call the roll.
Austin,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Clymer. Aye. Guzman.
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
King,
Aye.
Costelecki.
Aye.
Lennox, Smith. Torres.
Aye.
Unanimous, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Now need a motion to vote on the section 4, notice of cancellation of meeting.
Can I make a motion that we add language that says on the basis of weather or other emergency after award and before and July 2nd?
Any objection? Do we have a motion? Written?
I move to adopt that with that language added.
On the basis of weather or other emergency.
Weather, W-E-A-T.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Call the roll, Debbie, please.
Austin,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Clymer. Aye. Guzman.
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Costelecki. Lennox. Smith. Torres.
Aye.
Unanimous, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will vote on the decorum policy as written. Could I have a motion?
Make a motion, we accept and adopt 7.7 decorum to the bylaws.
Could I get a second?
Second.
Any questions? Debbie, call the roll.
Austin.
Aye.
Bailey.
Nay.
Clymer.
Aye.
Guzman.
Nay.
Harmon.
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Costello.
Aye.
Lennox.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Perez.
Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you.
And two comments at the end. As I mentioned to you, you need to follow the Freedom of Information Act. I'll send you a scribbled version of that, but it's in the code. And you also need to follow the Virginia Conflicts of Interest Act. And again, I'll send you some training materials on that just because it's a little easier to read unless you have insomnia and want to read the whole act at night. But you will need to be cognizant and follow both of those. And we'll try to keep you on track so that you don't have unintended violations.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Superintendent?
Sure.
Next on the agenda is the post 287G update.
All righty. The ADC 287G program ended on July 1st, 2020. ADC staff are no longer doing 287G investigations nor placing ICE detainers on inmates. ICE personnel no longer have a designated office or equipment at the ADC. They may use interview space like any other law enforcement agency by utilizing their laptops. When someone is committed to the ADC, with the exception of a drunken public charge, our intake staff conduct electronic fingerprinting, otherwise known as live scan, on everyone. These prints alert law enforcement agencies, to include ICE. At that point, ICE will make the decision to interview the inmate for official business. Examples of the interview could include criminal offenses such as illegal reentry after being deported multiple times, illegal reentry after being deported for an aggravated felony, and false claim of U.S. citizenship. ICE is a law enforcement agency, has been performing these duties for many years at the ADC and around the state prior to the 287G program. ADC staff will notify ICE of a pending release of an inmate with an ICE detainer. The release process is not interrupted or slowed down. When the process is complete, if ICE is not present, the inmate will be released immediately. We are not holding the released inmate while waiting for ICE at all. We have released several inmates from the facility because ICE has not showed up on time for the release. And that's all I have, Chairman.
Any questions from the superintendent concerning the post 287G?
I do have a couple
Yes,
questions.
sir.
All right, ma'am.
So, Colonel, do you notify, do we still follow practice of notifying ICE of a pending release date?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that done for all individuals? So people who have a misdemeanor, for example, do we still notify ICE of that?
That's correct.
So essentially, for any inmate that you're aware, you've been notified that there's an ICE detainer, you're gonna notify them of a pending release.
Correct.
Okay. Do we cooperate with ICE picking up an inmate prior to the conclusion of either a court date or the conclusion of a sentence here in the jail?
They have to be released from the jail for ICE to come up and pick them up. Released from their obligation here.
I've had some anecdotal evidence from lawyers, from defense lawyers, that they have clients here who have pending criminal charges, but ICE is coming in, taking custody of them prior to the conclusion of their case. And I don't have data about that from you folks. I just know that people here, lawyers here, have had occasion in the last 3 or 4 months where that's happened. So it would be important for me personally that not happen, that they need to be here and deal with whatever the court requirement is, and their charge needs to be dealt with to the end.
Now,
I don't know if we could just check on that.
If the court releases them,
That's different.
Yeah,
This is, what I'm hearing from people is that there's a pending charge, like they haven't been in court yet. And ICE is taking custody of the body of the person.
And they're here on the pending charge.
And they're here on pending.
No, they got to be complete with a pending charge with us, whether they're bonded out, whether they served their sentence, or they're released by court or the magistrate.
So what you're telling me is that people are just mistaken about that.
That's what it sounds like.
Okay, all right. If I can get individual cases, I'll come back to you about that. I
Okay,
mean,
sure.
It's a concern to me if that happens at all, obviously, and it sounds like it's not something that you would support it.
Anytime. You can get back to me.
Yeah, so I'll come back to you about that if I can get more data about it.
No problem.
And then the last thing is, when you allow ICE agents access to the jail to meet with or question individuals that are inmates here, is there any effort made to find out if they're questioning people on the basis of civil violations of law, for example, that their lack of documentation, as opposed to violations of federal criminal law?
We don't listen to their conversations, but my understanding is some of the information they talk about could be criminal cases. Like I explained, those were just examples. I don't know what else ICE talks to them about, obviously.
I can understand not wanting to listen to all the conversation. But when they request access, that's not part of the initial process where you determine why they're here, whether they're just checking on documentation issues as opposed to investigating actual criminal violations of law.
Say that.
You don't, maybe I asked it badly.
Sorry.
When ICE comes to you and says, hey, I want to interview John Doe, you don't ask, well, what are you going to, what's the purpose of your visit? And part of the concern, of course, is these folks don't have lawyers for that. They're not entitled to counsel when they're being questioned by ICE. And so it would matter to me whether ICE is conducting actual criminal investigation or are they conducting civil enforcement.
Yeah, we don't get involved in that conversation with ICE. Tracy.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the superintendent?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine.
I seem to recall when you took me on a tour and there was an area maybe that was kind of dedicated for your staff that were working in the 287G
Correct.
program. And I don't remember, everything that you shared about that area and those staff, but I'm just wondering in terms of infrastructure, computers, access to databases, things like that, could you tell us a little bit what has changed
Sure.
since
That area you're talking about, Ms. Clymer, has been dismantled. All the ICE computers and equipment is no longer there. Staff have been reassigned. Some staff were reassigned. 5 of the staff were reassigned into the police processing area because we never did get staff for that area. We're pulling them out of their intake. And then the other staff had gone to shift work, security shift. And we did lose 4 vacant positions that we had for down there.
because folks that you moved from 287G just got absorbed into those roles.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The detainers issued by ICE are administrative detainers. They're not court-issued warrants or detainers. The Attorney General has said that it is up to, put it that way, that you don't have to comply with those administrative detainers because they are not court-issued. You could, but you are not mandated to do that. That's been the opinions of the Attorney General on 2 occasions, 15 and 19.
Yes, sir.
Knowing that when this 287G issue came to us last month in June, that everybody kind of had an issue with the misdemeanors and the people that were not really the felons or the great things. But still, those detainers have been honored for those misdemeanors if ICE put detainers on them. is that consistent with what this jail board was trying to do on June 16th? Or that can we, as a jail say, we're gonna cooperate with ICE on all the felony detainers that you put on our felons, but we choose not to honor those detainers from ICE that have to do with this misdemeanors and that are a minor crime.
I didn't get any direction in that area
But it's some.
relating only to felonies and those forth. If an ICE,
Okay.
basically what we're doing, if ICE comes in and puts it and investigates and decides to put a detainer, it could be a misdemeanor, it could be a felon. I haven't been given any other direction to do otherwise.
So shall I put a motion, Mr. Chair, that the superintendent, the adult detention center, honor only ICE administrative detainers that are for felony convictions or felony charges, and not honor detainers issued by ICE that are for misdemeanors?
I don't know if, because a lot of times when detainer is placed on inmate, we don't know what that detainer is for.
You know what the charges on the individual are.
We know what the charge on the
Exactly.
individual, but we don't know what the detainer is for.
The detainer is for holding them pending their being notified of their release so they can determine if they're going to pick them up or not. That's what ICE explained to us on June 16th. But those detainers are administrative documents. They're not court order documents. Never been. And the Attorney General has given us the opinions that have said, in two separate opinions, that said that you may honor if you want to. You can do what you're doing. There's nothing illegal in doing what you're doing. But you can also choose not to honor those administrative detainers. And what I'm saying is, based on our conversation of last June, that if we should only honor the detainers that are for charges that are felonies, and not honor the detainers issued by ICE on misdemeanor offenses, meaning that we don't hold them for ICE to be picked up on detainers for misdemeanors, but we will hold them for them and do the process that you're doing right now if the charges are felonies.
Yes, you go ahead.
The motion you're referencing is the one that I made. That was to continue with the 287G program. That's no longer doing. So that motion was to continue 287G, only processing felonies, not what ICE, their general detainers, are what they were putting, which means, I don't know if I'm saying it wrong, the 287G just allowed our staff to issue those detainers. So we're not doing that at all anymore. So that's what that motion was for.
Yeah, it's the same concept, but it's only who issues the detainer. But it follows the same philosophical position that you actually were, which was your concern, that this was a very wide event that was catching people that really were, people that were committing misdemeanors and should not have been in that position. So what I'm trying to do is exactly the same thing, but not with adult detention center issue detainers as they were with 287, but by not honoring, legally not honoring, because we can do it because of the Attorney General's opinions, not honoring those detainers for misdemeanors and only honoring them for felony charges.
Now, sometimes, and we're seeing this a lot of times, a person will be committed to this jail on a misdemeanor, but the person has been deported previously, and that detainer that they put on them is actually still a detainer, but it becomes a felony instead of a civil commitment.
That's a felony perhaps for them.
For them, right.
But for us, for the local government, for Prince William County, that guy would have been there for speeding or a misdemeanor hit and run or driving without a license or on suspended license. So what I'm saying is that we should confine our collaboration, because it's collaboration between law enforcement agencies, our collaboration to the things that local government believes that should be. And felony is fine, but the felony is, again, it's a felony about ICE because they decided that entering the US after being deported was a felony, and that's federal law. They can still deport that individual. It's just that you are not, if the only charge that he has here is a misdemeanor, you shouldn't be concerned of the other charges that he may have on the federal side of that nature that you are telling me, because they're gonna pick him up at their house or any place else, at his place of employment or it. But the thing is, not having this, what I want is to protect these misdemeanor offenders that have the same consequences for immigration purposes than felons, based on how ICE administers immigration.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have a motion, and so the question would be whether you have a second and if there's further discussion.
Do we have a second?
I want to make sure, I will second it. I want to make sure I know what the motion is, and that is that you're suggesting that our adult detention center officers don't cooperate with ICE when there is a detainer against someone and they are charged here with a misdemeanor.
That's correct.
That just in those cases, we ask our adult detention center staff to not cooperate with ICE to the extent of calling ICE or any other mechanism to help them to execute the detainer itself. And if that's the motion, then I would second the motion. And if I can just say, I think given the cross-section of clients of mine that are charged with misdemeanors, that also have detainers against them, the majority of them are of the folks that get caught up by detainers this way and get deported, are undocumented, but they are, a lot of them have been here for years, they've got kids here, they're otherwise productive members of our community. I personally believe that for misdemeanor charges, the downside and the tragedy of it is so much more powerful. I agreed with felonies, really, that's much clearer cut for me, maybe someday down the road, but for now, this is easy, it's low hanging fruit from my perspective. Most of these people are otherwise productive members of our counties and our cities, and I would ask that people strongly consider voting for that motion.
And don't forget the separation from their families. In terms of, I heard somebody said, everybody that's in jail is separated from their families, so there's a difference. Somebody else might be separated from their family for a definite number of time, years, maybe days, maybe months, maybe years. But when you are talking about an immigrant that might be undocumented at that point in time, the separation is permanent. He is deported, and that family that stays back here will never be able to reunite with unless they live here. And these families sometimes are mixed families in terms of their American citizens kids, their permanent residence kids, their permanent resident spouses. There's a lot of mixed families around here. It's people make mistakes and they should be accountable for those mistakes. And how they're accountable? They're accountable by paying the sentence that is imposed and that you supervise in this jail. That's the way you pay the price for whatever it is that you do, in terms of driving unsuspended or being done in public and all those kinds of things. On the other hand, if you're a felon, then forget about separation. Felon is a felon. Okay?
What you're saying, it really puts us in a tough position because we're a law enforcement agency. So now we have to decide what laws that we're going to cooperate with ICE with and what laws we don't. So that puts us to be in a predicament as a law enforcement officer to make a discretion about what to do.
You're a local law enforcement officer, and I respect that. What you're saying to me is that you want to collaborate in enforcing federal laws, which is not the laws that you should be enforcing, immigration laws. So you are enforcing the law, because that person is in this detention center and will be paying a sentence in this detention center for a misdemeanor. You're not choosing not to obey other laws. You are choosing to let the federal government enforce their own laws and not be you, the one that is enforcing or helping enforce that law.
What we're doing is cooperating with them, not enforcing it. We are cooperating with them. The 287G was an enforcement. Cooperating with them is different, in my opinion.
And Mr. Chair, the cooperation, I think the cooperation should be on felonies because that serves both local community and federal government. But when you come to misdemeanors, that they serve the federal government, but certainly you're not building a Prince William County community that has so many undocumented immigrants around here by doing that kind of collaboration.
All right, could you state your motion again? Make sure we get it right, okay? State your motion again.
I'm gonna state it, but you state it better than I can.
Can I ask I guess Tracy, could Pete, to go back, Colonel,
Yes.
do we call ICE or is it done by the live scan and the fingerprint through safe and secure communication?
That's when someone first comes in, they do the live scan fingerprinting, and that's when ICE is notified that the person is here, that they may be interested in.
Got it. So what you're saying, Superintendent, is that we have nothing to do with that. Only thing we do is do our process, then ICE does what they want to do.
And we'll
right?
notify them when it's time for release.
Right.
That's what.
That's
we
the part-
That's what we want
The
different.
motion that I would make, the motion that I would make is that the ADC staff continue to conduct the live scan when they're on their way in. It's something we do for federal government, for NCIC processing anyway, and that gets communicated. So what I'd ask the ADC staff, what the motion would be is the ADC staff no longer notify ICE of impending release of misdemeanor inmates, just misdemeanor inmates, that you not notify ICE on misdemeanors when there's a pending release date, that you continue to do that for felony charges, but not for misdemeanor charges. Second.
Chairman, can I ask a
think we
question?
had, as I understood it, that was already.
Well, he
Yeah,
sort of
that- she
deferred
should
back to
state the
me,
motion
so I
and
think
restate
that
it.
that's the motion, and then somebody else, is that correct?
Yeah,
You
you
want me
already
to make
stated the motion, that's it.
Yeah, so you have a motion and a second on the floor.
Right. Discussion, yes, sir.
I just have a scenario question because I want to make sure we understand and I even understand what would happen. So I'm going to use as you call it, a low hanging fruit. Somebody used that. Let's say we arrest someone that is undocumented for a class 1 misdemeanor called shoplifting. They're getting ready to be released, but they are being detained because there is a federal detainer on them because they have committed a violent felony somewhere else and should have already been deported and they weren't. We are now going to, in this scenario, we would release this person who's committed a misdemeanor locally, but should have already been deported on a violent felony in another jurisdiction. But they would, in this case, we would not notify ICE because the local charge was a misdemeanor.
Mr. Chairman, I'm confused. I thought that when not that scenario was posed before, but I thought there was a generic statement made that the jail personnel don't know why the detainer is being placed on them other than they're undocumented. So Chief, if that's the case, how I don't know how that's a real scenario.
Well, that's right. We don't know. That's what I'm saying. We would not know if that happened. We could, in that scenario, we could be releasing, is the magic word, you could be releasing someone because we don't know that is got a detainer because they have a violent felony somewhere else. That is a concern for me going back to my community.
But Chief, realistically, in that scenario, and there may be others we could talk about, but in that scenario, if they have a pending felony somewhere else, they're also going to have a pending capias, that is a judge-issued capias somewhere else that's going to hold them here anyway.
But I know for a fact from cases we have seen and brought before, they could have already been deported before because of that violent felony. re-entered, but now committed this misdemeanor, and now they stay.
Yes, but in that scenario, they don't have a pending felony charge, violent felony charge. They've already been convicted of a violent
correct.
felony, done their sentence, been deported, and then come back.
But
Right?
then
I
they
mean,
would
'cause
get a,
that's-
but
that's
then
what
they
we-
would get a detainer on.
Right, but
So
that's
we
the
would
scenario.
release them,
I
but
get
we
it.
would release them.
I get it, but I want to make sure your scenario is very clear to everyone. They would not be pending a rape charge in Fairfax.
No.
If they were, there would be a.
They would have
case
never been
against them.
released, that's correct.
So they would not be here pending a criminal charge they had not been adjudicated for. They would have been adjudicated, served their sentence, left, and then come back. Now, granted, that's still a scenario that I understand law enforcement in the room is loath to let them be released and not have the detainer before. But that's very different. These people are not pending felony charges. They are pending a felony or a federal detainer for committing a criminal charge against federal law, which is re-entry after
Re-entry.
deportation. That's the charge. That's the criminal charge. Re-entry after deportation.
I'm simply asking Tracy for us to look at it a little bit broader, is that I agree with what you just said. I'm
Okay,
not
all right.
disagreeing with that.
Okay.
I have had violent gang members be convicted locally, deported, re-enter illegally, get picked up on misdemeanor, and in this case, that violent gang member would be released right back into the community because we would not notify ICE. That's a concern to me.
I think that's, of course, it's completely within our concern, sir. Is there a way for the jail to know if it's a gang member who's committed a violent felony in the past and has now come back? I mean,
think we
I
need
don't
more
have,
work on this.
well, and that's the thing, I don't have a problem, I can agree with you that there may be individuals that are not productive members of our community, that if we were able to use a scalpel on this problem, that we might be able to craft a rule that will address your concern there. But we don't have that right now, and the vast majority of people who are getting caught up in this for misdemeanors are not that guy. That's a tiny percentage of the people. I'm all for the violent gang member getting deported. He's got a detention order and he's been deported for conviction for violence in the past. Let's talk about that. But that's not the majority. And right now, the suffering for the people that are our community members that have misdemeanor charges, you're using a bludgeon on something, and if we can find a way to use a scalpel, let's do it. But
I think it needs more work. I think we need to talk to ICE and see if we can make that happen. I guess I just have to share how I feel.
yeah.
If someone was released, went out and committed a violent crime against someone, it's going to be me standing in front of our community as the chief or the county's chief, explaining to them how we allow this to occur. And I'm not willing to do that until we look at this program more in depth, because it's only going to take the one case.
Chief,
Major,
when you,
let's give the major a chance.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead, Major.
Along the lines of, I think we need a little bit more work on it. I think the motion is just a little bit, I don't know what word I want to use. I would like some information or data on the types of cases that you're talking about, because I think either examples that were given are somewhat anecdotal. We don't know how many people come into the jail on those misdemeanor charges, but also have an ICE detainer that we then notify.
I think we do have
And-
that. What we don't know is how
But-
many of them have this.
But what I mean
background.
is, that's not in front of us right now.
Gotcha.
So it's hard for me to make an informed decision without having that supporting data. We can all come up with scenarios, why we should be for this, or why we should be against it, or why we should have concerns or no concerns. But I think I would like for the data to speak a little bit as well, so that I can make an informed decision about what the best course of action might be. So it might be a little premature to ask for that type of a vote right now without a little bit more digging and a little bit more information.
You know, what we don't know is what's in the ICE investigation. We don't know that.
Right.
Even though the person is here on a misdemeanor charge, and I think the superintendent alluded to the fact a few minutes ago, that when ICE investigates and talk to them, we don't know what it's about because we've had people here that had a detainer on them, but other things has happened in other parts of the world and other things that ICE was investigating, but they're being held here on a misdemeanor, and the detainer is also put on by ICE, but we don't know what's in the investigation. We don't
Now,
know.
with the 287G program, since we were doing the investigation, we knew all about the person.
Right, well, we don't
Now
know
that ICE is, they're coming in here, we're not getting involved in their interview at all, so we do not know that fact.
Will ICE provide that information to you on the basis for the detainer? Is that something you can find out easily?
I have no idea, we'd have to find out.
Well, yeah,
I
I
mean-
mean, I don't, so I don't want to have this go on for 6 months. I'd like to know if we can get that information, if that's something that is obtainable. I know that the jail has, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Major Lambert, do we have information now about the number of people that have detainers that also are misdemeanor?
So we've stopped tracking data because the MOA no longer exists.
Okay.
Could we go back and try to pull the data? Perhaps. Would it be skewed? Perhaps. We don't necessarily, we're not tracking how many people are sitting here on misdemeanor charges with the 287G detainer. We're not tracking that. What I will tell you is that the detainers that you all are referencing, ICE isn't coming in and investigating. They're issuing detainers based off the hit from the computer system.
Right.
But let me caveat that. I've been involved in 287G since the inception. Oftentimes what will happen is that the history of that person is so egregious that a detainer is lodged, right? What we do know about the ending of the program is that a violent felony walked out this door that ICE did not make it here to pick up. What we do know today. So I think for me, that manages the booking and the records section, it's inherently critical that the jail board gives us direction on what we can and cannot do, because we have to give clear guidance, Tracy. And if data is what you want, data is what we will try to get. Absolutely 110%. The problem is we don't know why ICE lodges the detainers. What we know about the program is detainers are just not willy-nilly lodged against somebody with a drunken public. It doesn't work that way. I can honestly say that. So I think what we need is clear, concise guidance, because the last thing that we would want is standing behind a podium as a jail board or a chief or the superintendent saying, well, that's not what the jail board meant, but that's what the jail did. And it's a slippery slope. And what the sheriff is trying to say is oftentimes we will get a detainer and it may not be clearly identified as a civil, and instead it's a criminal. So you've got to understand what the detainers look like. It's a whole new training process for booking staff. We don't have 287G officers anymore that are trained to discern the document that we're getting. So this is much bigger, and I think what Dawn is saying, it's much bigger than just saying, don't accept it for the misdemeanor. It's much bigger than that. So I think what the superintendent is saying and what Dawn is saying, what the sheriff is saying is that we need some time to group, get some documents together, get the jail board information about what all of this looks like, so that we can ensure that we reduce the harm to the public. Right?
If we can agree to what data needs to be gathered, and then we should absolutely do that. I mean, none of us want to be under, none of us want that either. Community safety is critically important. We're just also concerned that there are aspects of this that I think community-wide, we would like to see change.
Sure. IT is sitting right here. Alan, is the data, can we still pull some data?
Yes.
Okay. So if you guys just give us direction
If
as
we've
to what,
collected that data.
yeah, give us direction as to what the data is that you want to see, and we can certainly provide that. to
But
you.
the data doesn't include.
Can we table this until our next meeting, until
Yes.
we can get all the information that you would like to have?
But before we do that, there, Chief, I think IT was about to say something that there is on this
No,
problem.
it's not that important.
We just need to know what data it
What-
is
what-
that you want.
What are we going to do? Table it to do, and what is going to take place during what period of time, Chief, Sheriff? Mr. Sheriff. There you go.
I will work with, because this is really something that would be done, like EBDM does this all the time, right? So I can talk with the folks here that expressed an interest in this, talk about what data we would like to get from Major Lambert, and then I'll come back to you, Major Lambert, via an email and say, here's what we're looking for, data-wise. And then before our next meeting, which I think is in September,
Yes.
can we circulate that information to the larger jail board so that people can start to think about what motions they might want to raise in September? Does that work?
And perhaps a draft of specifically what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and maybe we'll be able to, get something that has already, people have had a chance to think about. But
And
I don't have any objection to doing it that way.
remember that what I'm trying to get is the same thing that Chief Keen was trying to get to through the 280.
Yeah, really.
If we can. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. I don't want fellows out there in the community, but we have to identify how to do it without that.
I don't disagree with you. I think that for me, the difference was when it was housed internal, we did those investigations, so we knew the history.
Right.
Now we don't.
Big difference.
That's true.
Ms. Panda.
Might suggest, just so that nobody feels excluded in terms of providing it, a request with respect to documentation. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, you would want to set a time period for people to provide a request as to what particular documents they want or data. And then I'd say like maybe a week out, and then that'll allow the superintendent and his staff to see if they can identify that data and then come back as perhaps Jackie has said, with a proposed policy. So that you can see in writing, because I do think that we want to make sure that we're clear on what exactly the language is in the particular policy, so that the superintendent is aware and knows that it's feasible.
Now, I'm assuming that we're going to continue on to what I just went over here a few minutes ago about how it's working now, the policy. That's what I'm assuming what you all want to do.
That was what I understood, at least parliamentary wise. You have a motion, a second, and then if somebody tables with to the next meeting so that information and a draft policy can be provided.
Well, I would withdraw the motion that I made. So I don't think there's anything as of today.
Well,
It was actually Mr. Torres.
The motion, you reshaped
And then I,
it,
yeah,
so
so there you go.
Then I will throw it too, and then we'll put it forward at the next
Okay,
meeting.
so there's no motion. There's no motion at this point.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
All right.
Okay, procedurally, is this the process, not all the talk we were doing, but is this the process how we provide official guidance to Colonel Miletus and his staff by having a motion that we approve and say, this is what we want you to do going forward? This is a learning time for me.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the board sets policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is one of the responsibilities of the jail board or jail authority.
Okay.
Is to set policy.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just make one suggestion in that regard. That has not been routinely how the board has done it in the past, and it may be worthwhile for you to ask the question about the policy first, so that the superintendent can be prepared to tell you what he's doing. So that it's not just sort of, here's a motion, a second, go do this. And like tonight, we learned that you need to have some additional information. So it may be that you want to prelude that with asking the superintendent to come back to you to tell you what he's doing in a particular area, so that then you can understand what he's doing. Because there's a big learning curve there, and I only because a lot of us haven't done this for a long time. and know how the jail operates. And I think you would benefit and not have to do backtracking if you could hear from him or his staff how they're doing things first. And then obviously, if you think there's some shaping that will be done there or a different approach, then raise it.
Right, and I get that, and all of that makes sense. So, but considering all that, my question was the ultimate, after all that is done, how we would procedurally do that. So appreciate that, though, Ms. Bandit.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could it be at a starting point, we receive, what is this called? Communication from Superintendent Meletis about having, the ADC currently has 79 inmates with ICE detainers after the 287G. So could we use that data as a starting point to just know more about those 79 detainers and what happened in those? And can we use those as a data set?
Yes.
Yeah, we could. And
That's one of the questions that you want to submit to about those 79.
Yeah.
We'll have that response for you. Yes.
And now it's less than 79 now. There's been some releases and so forth. And I think we're right around 72 right now, the detainers.
Okay. And the last, Mr. Chairman, is thank you.
No problem.
I think that after the meeting that we had last month, we saw the desire, we experienced and heard the desire of the community of moving away beyond 287B, of moving away cooperation with ICE. I'm just gonna be completely transparent here. I've heard a couple of board members that desire of continue to cooperate with ICE. And when we're using examples as, you know, there is this gang member that was deported. I just want to make sure that they are also gang members that are born here and cannot be deported, and they're American citizens. So it's just that I wish that we are coming from a good place where we are acting in good faith, and we're going to look at the data transparently in order to move forward and allow our community to trust law enforcement.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. But it's one thing you have to understand. I can't speak for the two other law enforcement officers in the room, but I am a law enforcement officer, and I will not betray my badge based on policy. That will not happen. That will not happen. And I believe in working with the community, but you know, we'll have to work with the entire community, not just one statement, but the entire community, and enforce the law fairly. And that's what I believe in doing. And anything that we can do to help anyone in the community, I'm all in favor of it. I'm all in favor of it. But I have taken an oath, and I do not want to be in a position not to cooperate with any law enforcement agency that's performing their duties lawfully.
I think we got to cross that bridge when we get to it.
All right, sounds good.
So,
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just so everybody knows, if you're going to solicit requests for information,
Yes.
is 2 weeks enough time for people to put in their requests? And then, I don't know what you all.
In 2 weeks.
I was just looking at it. Today's the 22nd. 1 week is the 29th. 2 weeks is the August 5th. Am I right? Yes.
All right.
Yes, August 5th.
How long will it
So
take
everybody's
you
on the
to
same.
put together data once we know what the data points we're looking for are? How long does that?
So we're only going to be able to retrieve data from our local jail management system. We are not going to be able to get any of that information that existed with the 287G program. So it's just going to be from LMS. I would not imagine that it's going to take more than 3 to 4 weeks, depending on what it is that the board requires. So we may have to kind of flesh it out to see if, one, we can first get it, and two, that it exists, and then three, analyze it and get it to you.
Could you retrospectively recreate let's say the last 3 or 6 months of the 287G program? Who were the misdemeanors? Who were the felons? What were they being held? What were the detainers for?
It's possible. The problem with the data that we collect is misdemeanors, felonies, you know, as an attorney representing our client, a lot of times cross over, so they come in on both. So we have to flesh that out. How many actually had a felony? Are we counting them twice? What we won't be able to probably get, we will not be able to get, is the background as to why they had a detainer in the first place, which goes back to Chief Keene's point of all of the ones that have in their background violent felonies. That maybe, we will not be able to get that.
But you couldn't, when you were doing, when the jail was doing 287G, we didn't have that information about why you lodged the detainer?
We did, it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, the data's just gone.
It's
Okay,
gone.
yeah.
We don't have access to the federal computers any
Got it.
longer.
I somehow imagined that it was resident
Yeah.
here in the jail as opposed to being.
So Teresa, we haven't really looked at 287G data.
Yeah.
So to go back without the support of the federal.
I understand.
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like.
Okay.
So it's gonna be interesting to see what we
Okay.
have.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, is there agreement on the date is August 5th? Does that give you enough time to,
To let them know what we want.
Right, right.
Yeah.
and for you all to do the research?
But don't you know, Chief Keen, from the processing of a felony or misdemeanor, for example, when you check on the criminal record of that person through the process, a fingerprint process, whatever, wouldn't the convictions for felonies anywhere in the United States will show up?
You'd have to run an NCIC.
You see, I see.
But if you run that, you will.
Jail doesn't do that.
No, we don't do that.
But if you do that, you will know if that's a convicted felon anywhere in the U.S.
But see, that's part of doing the background investigation, and that was part of the agreement, and we don't do that anymore.
But my saying is, can you do that independently of 287G?
I don't think,
You need to.
I don't think the systems allow us to do
Not
an
for-
administrative check.
Correct.
Right, it's gotta be a criminal check.
My concern with that,
It's a
based
business
upon what
system.
you just heard was A, is I don't think allows, is then part two is, then we're going right back and doing everything we were doing with 287G that we voted against.
Well, this is just. for
Other
data
than-
collection.
That's for
This
data
is just for
purposes.
data collection. This
That's
is
for
just so we
data
can make a
collection.
decision of what we want the policy to be.
But there are certain
So-
rules that you can only use the
I get it.
NCIC for certain,
No, I-
certain
right.
reasons.
But-
Right.
but we got rid of 287G because we didn't want 287G anymore. We're just talking about data collection
Right.
now. And I get that there may be.
And we can't use the system just for data
I
collection.
get it. I get
Can't,
it.
can't do it.
I get
If we do get caught doing it, we lose the system.
We'll see what we can get.
Access.
We'll see what
Also
we can
could
get.
get
Oh, that's a big penalty. We
Yeah,
don't- we don't
also
do
get
that.
charged criminally.
Just a question, who should we submit this
Okay.
feedback to?
That's a good question.
Right, so is the August the 5th a good date for everybody to get their questions into?
Yes.
The superintendent?
You can send it to me and I'll get it to the staff appropriately and we'll look at it.
All right, sounds good. All right, one of the things I added to the agenda was, jail board members' comments. So we go around to see if anyone make a comment before we, end the meeting. And I'll start over with Steve. All right, thank you.
I made all my comments.
All right, sir. Ms. Goodwin?
Mr. Chairman, you promised me there will be an hour meeting.
Uh-oh. Do that
Mask
one.
is coming off.
Next,
Nothing further.
Ms. Smith.
I've realized I need to learn more about the booking process. Who should I reach out to talk about that? Okay, I thought so.
Yep.
You'll be hearing from me.
Anytime, always
Thank
here.
you.
Well, one other
I
thing,
think you're gonna get into my comment. That was one of my comments that we do. Okay.
Yeah, I've got some stuff to learn.
Reverend Bailey.
Yeah, I am, many people think that I sought this position out. I didn't. People sought me out to do this, but I'm glad that I said yes. There's good work to be done here. As you know, and I'm just kind of overwhelmed to be involved in such an incredible facility that does the things that you're doing, you know, world class. And I'm just excited about the possibilities and bringing the perspectives that I have to, you know, to going from great to even greater. So just really excited about it. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Major?
Nothing, happy to be back.
Thank you.
there you go.
Thanks for your patience.
Right, not a problem. one of the things I want to do, and I'm the direct superintendent and staff to do this for me, one of the things that sets us apart from other jails, when you're on a board like this and you're asked by other people in the public, what sets the Prince William Adult Detention Center apart from other jails? And one of them that I'm very proud to tell you is our programs that we offer inmates in the facility. So superintendent, and I want to do this at every meeting, and she talked about the booking process, but at the next meeting, I'd like for you all to do a presentation on our program.
No problem.
What we offer our inmates. And I know we have some letters on file from inmates about the success of the program and how it reflects on our recidivism. So please do that. And then at maybe one meeting, we can also talk about our booking process. What happens to a person when they arrive at the adult detention center? So because of COVID and you all cannot come into the facility and look around and watch the processes as they go on, we're going to try to do all that we can to bring those information to our meetings so that everyone can understand what happens. A lot happens in a jail. A jail is a small city, and a lot happens in a city. And all the problems within our community eventually ends up in the adult detention center. So that's why it's so important that we do all that we can do for people that are committed to our custody as punishment and not for punishment. All right? Thank you. There is no closed session. Next meeting will be a closed session because we have the superintendent's evaluation to do. And of course, Ms. Patton may have something for us to talk about. Hopefully not, but in case she does, we use that. All right. At this time, I have can I just want to entertain a motion to adjourn?
Were the lawsuits not, or,
There was a lawsuit, and I sent you all an email about the lawsuit that I had previously notified you about. And first, Judge Smith denied the temporary restraining order, and then the lawsuit was not sued. So,
I would move to adjourn.
Yeah, I was gonna say with that, I make a motion to adjourn.
You make the motion to adjourn?
I'll second hers.
You're second the motion? All right. All right. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Wow.
There you go.